Hi, my name's Nils, and the focus of this video will be to explain the comic that I drew for the creative piece for the English assignment. I'm going to explain and try to demonstrate why I chose the topic that I chose, how I came to choose that topic, and how I got to that topic from another topic. My original topic was how wildlife reserves affect the image that South Africa get and Africa in general towards public in other countries. So to focus on this, I looked up rules that game drivers have to follow in game reserves such as Kruger National Park and Madikwe Game Reserve. Unfortunately, I didn't find this. So I started looking up how animals varied from different. My original topic was how wildlife reserves affect the image that South Africa get and Africa in general towards public in other countries. So to focus on this, I looked up rules that game drivers have to follow in game reserves such as Kruger National Park and Madikwe Game Reserve. Unfortunately, I didn't find this. So I started looking up how animals varied from different reserves and how that might affect them. While looking at this, an idea passed through my head on thinking about how Africa is pictured by people who are outside the country due to media. So what I did was I started talking to one of my friends who hasn't left Europe and has a very general idea of Africa. So I asked what his idea of Africa looked like, and South Africa specifically. And what he described to me was animals roaming wildly, such as lions and giraffes, and huts made out of dirt that people lived in. He thought that we didn't have electricity and that I was using solar panels to somehow gather electricity and be able to use the internet to talk to him. Through conversing with my friend in Sweden, I realized that this topic was a good topic because the media in Sweden and probably other countries as well only show specific parts of South African culture and African culture in general. What my friend told me was being shown on Swedish TV about Africa was animals, and he rarely saw people in it. And when he saw people, he didn't see cities and shops. He saw people living in dirt houses, which is not an accurate interpretation of South Africa anymore. The idea of wildlife to have in my creative piece has continuously been there, but I wasn't sure how to have it as a full, which is why I first started out looking at game driving rules, but I've continuously been looking at the stereotypes. This is also one of the reasons why the idea of media outside South Africa was a good idea for me, because I like the idea that stereotypes put forth by media can be shattered by just travel. So my idea for my comic was to have a family and have them looking at South Africa and seeing what they think, the stereotypical type of South Africa, and them deciding to travel there. The idea of wildlife to have in my creative piece has continuously been there, but I wasn't sure how to have it as a full, which is why I first started out looking at game driving rules, but I've continuously been looking at the stereotypes. This is also one of the reasons why the idea of media outside South Africa was a good idea for me, because I like the idea that stereotypes put forth by media can be shattered by just travel. So my idea for my comic was to have a family and have them looking at South Africa and seeing what they think, the stereotypical type of South Africa, and them deciding to travel there. So I decided on this because South Africa is an amazing country, but it doesn't only have the uncivilized part of South Africa. I used this to show the audience of the comic how people picture South Africa who haven't been here. They often think of it as a very uncivilized country, and I'm sure many people who have lived in Europe or America thought the same thing when they were moving here. I personally, when I was moving here, was confused about how our living conditions were going to be like, how we were going to get to school, and how school was going to be, because I thought that South Africa was just as the media shows, plain open areas with wildlife roaming about. But in the comic, when they arrive in South Africa, they see a city, and to show that the kid in the comic doesn't understand and doesn't make the connection between the media and real life, that I have made the kids say in the comic, when do we get to South Africa, when they are standing looking at the city. Now this is supposed to indicate to the reader that the kid's idea of South Africa is staying with him, and he doesn't understand that South Africa is not as the media shows. The kid still thinks that South Africa is an open plain, so he thinks that this is just another stop and is another civilized country. Also, in the first segment of my comic, I have written that I've made the grown-ups say such a beautiful untouched place. And this is supposed to indicate that he believes that it isn't civilized. So what I wanted to do with this piece was to show a stereotype and destroy it at the same time. And by doing this, I can not only show South Africans the way that people outside of the country think about South Africa, but people outside the country thinking South Africa is just plains and the type of image that they get from their media, that it isn't, and that the media doesn't show exactly what it is, and that it's a developed country in a way that you wouldn't believe if you haven't been there and you've been brought up thinking about Africa and South Africa in this way. South Africa has a very fine line between the stereotypical South Africa and the South Africa that is now. To continue to have the picture that people outside of South Africa have is not a good thing, but to have part of it and add on with a city and the civilization would put forth South Africa in a totally different way to people outside, and would have people want to travel there in a totally different way. It would bring through people like artists, not photographers, and it would bring in a new spectrum of tourists. So South Africa is not only to be thankful for the stereotypical image that it gets to take in money from tourism, but it also needs the image that it can create